We can talk about the shorts thing.
The
that I
short
did before.
shorts. Who wears short shorts?
So remember that.
Richard wears short shorts. So right now we're with Richard Dolan, and Richard is wearing his boxer shorts under the table, just like he did in the last episode of Truth Warriors.
I am, but I'm also wearing a pair of pants over the boxer shorts.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
we've got that happening.
Your boxers or briefs?
Right now, these are boxers.
Okay. Like.
I didn't realize we were going down this path, but yes, actually, in this case, when we did our interview the last time, I was wearing shorts. But that was funny.
It
So
didn't look it, though.
I threw a sports jacket on, and I think I just had regular. Because it was warm outside. I was like, oh, I got to do the interview with Whitehead. So
You're like,
had
screw it, we're
shorts.
doing it live.
I said I'm going to put something nice on. So I think I threw a sports jacket on. But yeah, I was just wearing shorts under the camera there. So
It didn't come through at all. Actually, I think it added to the interview. It was more humorous. Well,
it worked out.
This man gave an amazing interview today at the Architects for the New I butchered this all day.
For the new paradigm.
For the New Paradigm. You know why? Because it says new. I think of like Architects of the New World Order. No, that's not what we're doing.
Yeah,
right?
no, it's no.
A different world
I don't
order.
think so.
No.
I think it's a paradigm.
It's a paradigm shift.
So we're
here part of the paradigm shift. And Richard and I go way back. We have some fond memories. We were discussing about traveling across Canada and having the truck start on fire.
The truck fire. So we took an RV. We took an RV from Halifax to Vancouver.
Yeah.
All right. So
that's coast to coast, baby.
All of Canada. It was actually. I'm an American. It was a beautiful experience for me to see Canada that way.
Yeah.
Honestly, and Dave was. That you and Chris really ran this tour, and it was fabulous.
Oh,
and I love meeting you. I love meeting your wife Monica.
She talks to you about you this day.
Is that
She's
right?
Like, Richard is awesome.
Well,
you have a big fan.
It's wonderful. I appreciate that. And, we just had a fantastic experience in your dojo. We did an interview there.
You took me down with a wrist lock with nunchucks. This guy is a badass ninja UFO guy.
I minored in nunchuckery in junior college. So want you to know.
Together, Richard and I wanted to announce about how we're going to be creating a whole new system of martial arts and self-defense when the aliens invade. We need to find a way to deal with these subspecies of multi-limbed beings. No, anyways.
I nearly spit out my beer. That was actually really good.
Okay, was that a good segue?
That was very good, yeah.
Okay. So, Richard, you said something that I loved. You brought it up. You brought up the idea. There's a lot of stuff in the UFO field, a lot of fluff. A lot of ponies and rainbows, a lot of utopianism, and I understand it. It comes from a good place for most people.
Right.
But it can be dangerous because it seems like people tend to gravitate towards this issue not in a serious way. They gravitate in many ways because it replaces almost like a religion or like a feeling of being accepted and being saved, and
I think there's some of that.
Some of that. What do you think?
I think people come into it for different reasons. People have had experiences and they don't know how to process it.
Right.
And so they're kind of lost. They come in and they're looking to find out what happened to me. So there's that. But there is, and then there's just people who get into it for pure intellectual curiosity, which is how I got into it. But there are people who will. Have this kind of they want answers, they want some kind of security, and their old world paradigm might have shattered for one reason or another because of the process of waking up and taking that red pill, and now
can be traumatic. Right?
It is a traumatic thing to lose the belief system that you grew up with, and so there are lots of folks who want that solidity, and they'll find in the UFO subject they'll find this belief that getting the answers to this will solve the major problems of the world.
Right.
And so there is a kind of utopianism that creeps into some of the UFO-related culture. It's definitely there, and I'm not a friend of that. And it's not that I don't like people who happen to be utopian. Some of them are very nice people, but I think it's a dangerous state of mind. And at every opportunity, I'll try to speak out against it.
And you're the kind of person that I've always looked up to in this field because you bring the facts. And you came from a genuine curiosity, and you could see that, and I've always seen that about you. And was that something, you said that's how you got into it, was the curiosity.
Yeah.
Is that what keeps you going today, or do you
is.
feel like there's a demand on you to talk about it?
It's a little bit of both, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very lucky. I get to live a life where I get to talk and write about a subject that absolutely fascinates me. And there are people who are willing to listen to me, so that makes my life unbelievable that I'm actually in a position where this happens. But what drives me is a curiosity. And if I ever cease to be curious about this subject, there's nothing that could keep me in it. Like, I'm only doing what I do because I find it fascinating.
Right.
And until I stop finding it fascinating, I'll stay in it, which I think, I assume this will be the rest of my life. Someone was asking me, it was during the panel today, George Norrie was asking the question, like, so if disclosure were to happen, what would you do? And Steve Bassett answered that one first, and he was talking about how the relief would be, like this physical relief and the party and all of that. And for me, I thought about it. My answer was, I would undoubtedly have more questions to ask about the process of disclosure, because I assume it wouldn't be complete. It would probably be a very messy scenario, and that there would be so many more issues to engage my mind, that I assume that disclosure would be the beginning, not the end of the next level of the search for truth. And I would just want to stay in this field because I find it intrigues my curiosity.
And it's also important. I think that's one thing that is clear, is that this isn't just some interest. It is a curiosity, but it's also very important. It implicates who we are in the world, our place in the universe, where we've come from in the past, and where we're going in the future. This is one of the most important subjects. There's a reason why religious ideas have been so powerful. And now we have a new way of looking at those religious ideas, eh?
I'm very glad you said that. It is important, and I guess that goes without saying. I wasn't even mentioning that. In terms of how it affects, you just mentioned religion. I guess that was your question. It would disclosure affect religion? Were you asking me that, or did I miss it?
No, I just think that it's important in the same way that religion is important to people.
Oh, I see, right.
It's answering those questions, like,
who
am I, why am I here, where am I going?
Fundamental. And also, I mean, we'll just state what for me is the obvious, which is that the UFO reality is a reality. It's absolutely worldwide. It's powerful. It represents an intelligence that is able to do things that we don't know how to do. So they've got technology and they've got capabilities in science that are beyond our current level of civilization. That, I think, is an open and shut case. So that's important on itself. What's furthermore important is that the political institutions of our world have not been honest about this. And this is a really important thing. So you've got something that's very, very profound, very important, and the governments of the world, dominated by the United States for the most part, have been mum about this. That's a problem. That's something that creates a kind of psychosocial problem for a society down the road, in my view. It's also a problem in terms of the money that it costs to keep this secret, in terms of all the scientific R&D, the infrastructure that goes into this to presumably replicate this technology, which I think certainly that they're doing. So there's like a big hole in our global financial system, out of which a lot of money is going into this classified infrastructure. So it's important on a lot of these levels, and I can only imagine how significant it is in terms of all of like the problems that we're facing in this world today. We could ask ourselves, how much of these problems are actually caused directly by the UFO cover-up? And I suspect that the answer is it's an important factor, that this edifice of lies, which is in a sense a foundation for our society. Just imagine, like, I don't know if it would solve all of our problems. I doubt it. We always find a way of creating new problems. But by resolving this one issue, I think we could really go a long way toward genuinely making this world a better place.
Right.
I really think so.
And I mean, it would also, as you were saying, like, it's Pandora's box. So if we hit this subject and we get the disclosure or the acknowledgement or the mass awareness of this issue, it also sheds light on other issues that have been holding us back. Like, if we look at the American experiment, the idea of the founding of America, which for the first time was a system that honored the rights of the individual and honored the
Yeah.
path of the individual. It was
That's
the
right.
first time in history, right?
That's right.
And it achieved something that took so many people out of poverty and brought a whole new concept of what freedom really was. And now it seems like that's been dampened because of all the lies, and it's like as if that government turned on that whole. It's not just the government,
Yeah.
but there's so many elements that have corrupted that idea. And now you see with what happened with the election of Donald Trump, and it's like there's the division in America, and people are trying to figure out the socio-political mess. Where does that UFO subject, it's just kind of always hovering in the background amongst all of that. This is like the political, social drama of what we're trying to do to figure out where we're going to go as a civilization. But isn't it interesting that on the periphery of this, we've always got this bigger question.
It's really true.
Lurking, you know what I mean?
It's really true. Like in all, in the U.S. and in Canada, it seems all people ever want to talk about is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Like he's just always there. He's ever present. It's fascinating. The fact that people are obsessed by him is just a signifier of how manipulated they are by the corporate media.
Right.
Because it's really the corporate media that is just fixated on him over and over and over again. And so people, that's all that they know, and they now fixate on him, whether they love him or hate him. But in fact, it's really true what you say, that the UFO subject has never gone away. It's ever present. It's ever important. And within the classified world of the Western militaries, the U.S. to Canadian military, no different. This remains very important. I just spoke to a woman at this conference here today whose uncle was in the Canadian Air Force, and she told me of a conversation she had with him in the 1970s,
Wow.
by which he openly said to her that Canadian Air Force are regularly attempting to intercept these disc-shaped objects that are easily able to outperform their best jets.
Wow.
They would engage in Soviet jet fighters trying to probe the borders, which trip radar installations, which that's the story of the Cold War. Western and Soviets were constantly doing that. But this high-level Air Force officer of Canada told his niece that it wasn't just the Soviets. They were encountering these other objects as well. So my point simply is that within the classified world, this is really important. And, if we were to change our consciousness a little bit and think about this subject as a matter of public discourse, as opposed to how much people love or hate Donald Trump.
Right.
Like, I suspect we could actually change our global consciousness in a very positive way,
Yeah.
and actually start toward solving real problems, like the real problems of the siphoning of money out of our system for this secret, and the real problem, or at least challenge, of finding out what is it that who are these other beings? What do they want? Are they friend or foe? Are they here to help us or not? Or can they teach us things that we may want to know? I mean, there's real opportunities here as well as challenges, and we're not asking any of these questions.
Yeah.
Because this whole topic has been off limits for an entire human lifetime since we've been encountering it.
And it seems like anytime it gets a leg up, when there's something big that breaks, all of a sudden there's a new hysteria in the media. There's a new focal point that takes the attention away from some of these questions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the general public it's very easy to manipulate people. I used to think, I made an analogy in one of my books. I said, controlling the public is not as easy as driving a car. It's more like riding a horse. A horse has a temperament. A horse has a personality. But if you're a good rider, you can ride that beast.
Yeah.
And that's the public. The public has been trained, and the riders are propaganda masters. They know how to manipulate the public and to get what they want. So unfortunately, it's true that by and large, people are pretty easy to manipulate. This is the science of public relations is now about a full century old. People like Edward Bernays,
Right.
the nephew of Sigmund Freud, was one of the real pioneers of this, and he knew what he was doing. He knew how to use psychological principles for mass manipulation. Bernays was the guy who got an entire generation of women to start smoking back in the 1920s as a sign of liberation. That's genius. And, public relations and propaganda have progressed ever since. And we're at a point now where it's such a sophisticated science. And most people, God love them, but most people don't have much education. They don't have much time. And most don't even have much of a desire
There's no interest,
to try
yeah.
to fight this system. I mean, people work hard, they come home, they're tired, they want to watch their football or watch their reality TV, and I sympathize with this.
Yeah, same.
When I was a lot younger, I would get much more self-righteous about a thing. People need to educate themselves and understand. What I've come to understand is that people are people.
Yeah.
I had a grandmother years ago, and I miss her to this day, and she didn't have any education. She was very simple, and she loved me and I loved her, but it's not like she was going to go cracking the Da Vinci Code.
Right.
That's not going to happen, and I think that's what most of this world is. And so people are they're prime targets for a manipulation propaganda system that's really sophisticated. And so, but the good news, I guess I could say, is this. I was recently hanging out with my very good friend Catherine Austin Fitz, who was a member of the Bush senior administration and is a financial whiz herself, and she's taught me a lot. And one thing that Catherine really pointed out to me is that change, positive change, doesn't necessarily require having the majority of the people with you.
Right.
If you have a minority, a significant minority of smart, motivated, ethical people who are really, really working to make this world a better place, you can have positive change, and I'm willing to believe Catherine. I think that she's onto it.
Well, I mean, look at the American Revolution. Wasn't it
Yeah.
like less than 8% or 5% of the American population that fought the British? It was a small percentage.
Yeah, it was a small percentage, yeah.
I don't know what the exact number was, but it was small. And
It's-
even the Battle of Thermopylae, where the Greeks were trying to liberate themselves
Yeah.
at the Hot Gates against the Persian invasion, and
against
like
the
on and
Persians.
on, we have these examples.
I love meeting a Canadian who knows something about the American Revolution.
I love the
It's
American history.
It's a cool, it's very interesting.
You inspired me, Richard.
I have a real, I'm American, I'm from New York, and I have an absolute love of American history. I adore American history, and I'm very, very aware that America has failed to live up to its ideals in almost every opportunity it has.
But you know what sucks is that they get burned for
Yeah.
what it's become, and people forget about what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So here I come from Justin Trudeau socialism land, and I look at America with envy, and I'm like, in terms of the original idea,
Right.
was what I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like,
Yeah, the idea was one of the most revolutionary and positive revolutionary ideas of all time.
Yeah.
And, the fact that Americans had slavery and the fact that the Americans still wage war against the native inhabitants is
But everybody
a
had slavery.
stain and is a bad thing. And Americans are still working that shit through,
Right.
by the way. And we haven't finished that job. But it's really true what you say. The ideals of 1776 are really important. And it's all too easy for people to dismiss those in a kind of cynical
Yep.
manner, and that's really a bad idea. What those ideals taught us is that you are not responsible for the sins of your forefathers. You are not responsible for the sins of anyone except your own.
Right.
You're responsible for what you do in this world. That's actually a radical idea.
Yeah.
And I'm responsible for myself. And it's also not for me to judge you based on what group you belong to, whether it's an ethnic group or a religious group. The ideals are that I should be judging you based on the kind of person that you are.
Right.
And you should do likewise to me. That's an unbelievable idea. And it's easy to kind of forget that.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're moving into a world where increasingly, unfortunately, people are being judged based on their ethnicity or their language group and things like this, which it's a really very dangerous path to go down.
Yeah. Well, it's again another narrative that's been constructed that, for example, Richard, we are both cisgendered white males right now talking about this. So essentially, we're we're mansplaining everything to people, and there's all these terms and these things, and we're sitting there going, no, my name's David Whitehead, you're Richard Dolan, I'm a good guy, you're a good guy.
We're just human beings.
We're human beings
with ideas.
I love
So-
all human beings. I don't want anybody to be suffering or enslaved or whatever. But I love when you think about a philosophy that actually does unite people, people think, oh, it's these collectivistic, communistic models that unite people. But the truth is, no. It's the idea that you respect people for their individuality, the rights, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and even just in the law that comes even out of the British system as well,
Right.
is idea of the individual concept. And when we
Absolutely.
approach, if you and I were to approach this big subject, we're not approaching it as a collective group of a team that's on some, we're just associated with our gender. We're approaching it as people that genuinely care about who we are, why we're here, where we're going, and our place in the cosmos.
Well-
And it doesn't have anything to do with all that other shit.
And furthermore, what makes us valuable, in my view, is what ideas and productivity and good things that we can bring to the table.
Exactly.
So it's like, what do we do?
Yes.
What are our ideas? How intrinsically good are those ideas? And if they succeed or fail with the wider public, that's up to the world to decide. But that's what it's about. It's not like speaking as a middle-aged white male, which I suppose is what I am. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, if anyone really gives a shit about what I think because of the way I look, then they have a lot to learn.
Right.
Like, because what they're missing then is whatever my message may be.
The ideas,
and
right.
they can accept or reject those
Yes.
ideas, and that's up to them. But it's not about the person. It's about the ideas. It's about. So yeah, I think. Hopefully, this will be a little hiccup in our civilization, and we can get through it. I would like to see that.
I'm with you on that.
So, relating to tying this back to we talked about disclosure and utopians and all of that stuff in the beginning, and I remain hopeful that there will be forward motion on this biggest of issues. This is the UFO cover-up. Actually, is a huge issue, and I don't know if it's the only huge issue in our world. There's others, but this is a big one. One thing I would just say to other folks who are consider themselves alternative researchers and the like is, but who don't look at the UFO subject as something serious, I just will remind them. I say this almost like a mantra. You disbelieve your government on everything except UFOs. Like, you'll disbelieve them on underground bases or on start of various wars or on 9/11, but you're going to believe the government on UFOs. Stop and think about what you're doing there. All right, the governments of the world, and the U.S. particularly, have lied about UFOs for generations. They haven't stopped lying, and there's a reason that there's ridicule on this subject, and it's hard for people to overcome the whole ridicule factor. It's probably the single hardest thing. But the ridicule itself has been embedded into our culture.
Right.
Culture's not this independent commodity that just springs up naturally. It used to be, but it isn't. It's manipulated by hierarchies, and the culture of ridicule has absolutely been inserted. The very phrase conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist is a CIA construct from the year 1967. And it came out in a CIA document as an idea of disabling the people who disagreed on the Kennedy assassination, which in 1967 that was a new thing. And there were truthers, I guess you could say, for the Kennedy assassination back then. And the CIA created a paper, and one of the strategies that it suggested was to use this phrase conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist to disable these alternative ideas about the Kennedy assassination. So anyone out there who starts using the phrase conspiracy theorist, that really should be aware that they are literally doing the work of the Central Intelligence Agency, and it's been going now for 50 years. That meme was created by the CIA. So you want to use it, you're doing their work. Just like if you want to do drugs, you're doing their work too.
Right.
Because the CIA stands for, I believe, Cocaine Importing Agency, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
So,
exactly. Forget the
just,
Cubans.
Feel good about yourself, legalize it, brother, but you're actually doing the work of the agency as well.
Right.
That's really, and also
Except for cannabis, because that's a very sacred subject in Canada.
Well,
and it's not the same.
I've got nothing against
Richard.
cannabis.
Okay, good. Making sure.
I've got nothing against it, but I would say that an over-reliance on any of these drugs will dull
if you
your
eat too many
mind
cheeseburgers, that's a
and
bad
take
thing.
you-
If you go to too many movies and don't watch any documentaries, then that's a bad thing. If you
I am in British Columbia. I have to realize.
Yeah,
this
like,
is the home of BC.
hold
Bud.
on.
I get it. I get it.
moderation,
We must
self-control,
respect the native
individualism. Yes,
Our
but
home and native land.
before
So-
we end this, Richard, I want to finish on one of the theories that I love that you brought up, and I think it's so good, and it's the idea of a breakaway civilization.
Oh.
This is, I know you've talked about this, everybody asks you about it, but I think it's huge, and it also feeds into this idea of a secret space program.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched Richard's presentation on the secret space program, I believe you did this in Europe.
I did a
Henrik
couple.
put one for you.
Yeah. There's one from 2011, I believe, and one from 2014.
Right. They're fantastic. You gotta check it out.
I haven't seen them lately, so I can't remember.
They're good.
But thank you. So the idea of a breakaway civilization is actually a pretty simple idea. I sometimes describe it as the black budget world on steroids, with ET tech tossed in there, and classified patents and so forth. So in other words, think of it where we commonly hear that the classified world is often decades ahead of the non-classified world in terms of certain technologies. And I think this is a truism, and I don't think too many people doubt that. I had a conversation I've talked about a few times with a scientist who was a civilian scientist for the NSA in the mid-1960s, who told me in a pretty straightforward way that NSA mid-60s had computers with clock speeds of, I think he said 650 megahertz. Now today that's nothing. But the consumer market did not reach that clock speed until the year 2000, 35 years later.
Right.
So you could say in that sense that the NSA was 35 years ahead of the consumer market in leading edge computer technology. So that gives you an idea. And then there's a lot of other examples we could use. So with the breakaway civilization, let us assume that something like Roswell did happen, which I think it did. The recovery of exotic technology, not from this neighborhood, not from this civilization, that would then be considered extremely valuable. Like valuable in every possible sense of that word, and it would be studied and probably not fully understood, but eventually maybe understood a little bit, and eventually possibly the repository of some very valuable ideas that could be segued for moneymakers in industry, which I think happened to some extent, and other ideas that would be considered too important, like breakthroughs in energy or breakthroughs in propulsion. If there is in the classified world such breakthroughs, and I believe that absolutely there are. For example, the U.S. Patent Office, I think, famously has thousands of classified energy patents. And I think some of them are probably related to this subject of ours. So then we assume that there's a team of classified scientists working on ET UFO tech. And eventually they come up with some breakthroughs in propulsion, some form of anti-gravity, or in terms of energy breakthroughs. These are breakthroughs that are too disruptive for this civilization.
Right.
Way too disruptive. And so they would be held back. They would absolutely be held back. And their patents would be classified, and then civilian scientists who have their own breakthroughs in those areas would be prevented from pursuing them. But the classified world would continue to pursue them, and they would be racing ahead of us. And I think at a certain point they would get to an area where their science and their capabilities and their infrastructure are so far beyond us that we could consider them a separate civilization when that's broken away from our own. If they've got radical science, radical cosmology, an ability to leave the world, maybe in those big black triangles that people are seeing, to go off-world, have encounters that we would be unable to have, giving them a new cosmology. So yeah, a separate civilization, a breakaway civilization. And I do believe that's part of the mix of what's going on in this world of secrecy of ours. So you've got the official government bodies that are more or less window dressing. You've got the military-industrial complex, but then a part of that leads off into this, siphons off into this other world, this breakaway civilization. Now, how significant, how advanced are they? This I don't know. I mean, do they have portal technology? Do they have time travel technology. Do they? I don't know, and I'm suspicious of a lot of the claims that I hear. But I do believe that there's exceptionally advanced science and technology that's being withheld. So in a sense, our humanity's future is being held hostage to secrecy.
Right.
And at a certain point, we want to deal with that, you know? I mean, who wants to be spoon-fed bullshit for the rest of their life? That's really what this is.
And I would just add to that if you couple the research that you've done on tracing the money and looking at the way the government has done things, and you had this idea of a breakaway civilization, if you couple that with looking into the world of the occult and a lot of these secret societies and fraternities, and you read the writings and the manuscripts coming out of the ancient world all the way up to the present, of which many of these elites attach their lineage to, and they do these rituals and things like that.
This is fascinating.
There's this idea that they actually believe themselves to be a separate species from the human race.
You quite possibly may be onto it. So there's a couple of good books that if this is a new idea to somebody, there's two books off the top of my head that I would refer them to. One is by the late Jim Marrs, my old friend.
Oh yeah.
Ruled by Secrecy.
Totally, that's a great.
I think it's his best book.
Yeah, it is.
Came out in 1999, and what he does in this is he takes you back step by step into the past. And he says, look, if we assume that the presidents and prime ministers are not really running the world, which they're really not, who is? And he looks at the financial powers and the Bilderberg organizations and trilateral commissions and the Council on Foreign Relations. And he says, well, how far back does this go? And he goes back through human history. And he talks about the Masons, and he talks about the Illuminati, and he talks about, the secret societies of the Middle Ages and farther back.
There's 148 different secret society headquarters in Vatican City, just so people know. So
that's amazing.
That's pretty crazy.
The other book that I would recommend for people to read is by a Canadian genius named Manly P. Hall.
Oh yeah.
Manly Hall wrote about 100 years ago The Secret Teachings of the Ages.
Yeah, great book.
And I don't understand how he wrote this book.
He was only like 25,
26,
guy.
27.
Yeah.
And he writes a book that's this thick that when I first encountered this book, I assumed this had to be written by a man in his mid-70s at the end of a long career of the study of the esoteric traditions of ancient civilizations and ancient religious beliefs. But no, this guy from Canada moved to LA, writes this work of absolute genius.
It's BC Bud. He's smoking the BC Bud.
I guess that had to be it. Maybe that's his answer.
No, there are geniuses. He tapped into the consciousness field, the resonance field.
He was unbelievable. But the reason I mentioned him here is that he also seemed to have a very deep understanding of the esoteric nature of these ancient religions, and talked about how these elite esoteric traditions were reserved only for certain initiates, who went through the hard work to learn the important secrets. And for him, the key esoteric secret was how to achieve immortality of the soul. What he points out is that ancient people did not all automatically believe that your soul was instantly immortal. That you had to work. You had to work toward attaining it. But anyway, so for what you're talking about, this tradition of elites holding occult, esoteric knowledge really goes back throughout all of human history. That's totally true. And with researchers like Jim Marrs, he does make a pretty good case that elites throughout human history have always seen themselves as well above the great rabble, which we are. And they've always had this goal of living like gods.
Right.
And if possible, achieving some level of immortality. And it's odd to say, it's crazy to say, but we're now at a point where these elites today may be able to see that they can do this.
Yeah, you were mentioning this in your presentation with the transhumanism.
Exactly, so that they can live truly like gods, and also achieve some kind of physical immortality, like manipulating those telomeres and whatever else it is that controls aging. We're now faced with a future where people are, got some kind of crazy thing going on.
I think there's like a soccer game happening out here now. We're close.
So we're looking at a potential future where people are now openly talking about some level of immortality. And what I would simply say is these AI people and these futurists are frightening to me. They're terrifying. Some of them are just like, yeah, this is the way to go. This is the future. And I just keep thinking, you're going to find a serious way to fuck this up. Because immortality, better health, better intelligence, yeah, for those who can afford this. This is not going to be free. And this is not going to go to all 7.5 billion human beings. And what we're really looking at, we're staring in the face the creation of a caste-based, a biologically based caste system. A biologically based caste system. Yeah. Where, I mean, we're almost there now. Where very, very wealthy people they're born into all kinds of wonderful situations that poor people just aren't. Yeah. But it's going to be getting to a point where it will be biologically ingrained. And we really can envision an awful dystopia where there will be certain people who will be born like as gods. You can just see it happening. And what's going to happen to, the vast majority of people that there's not going to be jobs for them?
Right.
I mean, what are they going to do? All hang out and take opioids and watch TV? Yeah. That's basically all they're looking forward to. And, as I said earlier today, the creation of a middle class is a historical anomaly. Yeah. And I believe it was only allowed to happen because it benefited those people at the very top of our hierarchy. Because the unleashing of all of this genius potential of humanity allowed for all of these amazing inventions to take place and this creation of the world that we're living in now. And so those people at the very top did benefit. But now they are at a point where intellectual labor increasingly can be done by algorithms. It doesn't have to all be done by people. And the labor can be done increasingly by
3D printing and
3D printing and automation.
Yeah, automation.
So people are actually not as critical to this process anymore. And those folks at the top, I think, are realizing it. So all of us, it's not just the lesser educated. It's everyone increasingly is becoming more and more expendable. And so what's going to happen? I mean, we really need to ask, what is going to happen? What are we all going to be able to do to survive? You've got these futurists talking about we need a universal basic income. And I'm like, okay, A, you know nothing about economics. B, the real thing is that's the quickest, fastest, easiest way to make people into total dependents, slaves to the state. Now, the only thing, though, someone challenged me on this not long ago, and they said, good, you want to criticize this, but what are people going to do? How are they going to survive? And the only partial answer that I could say is, well, it would be nice if you unleashed some of the bureaucracy and laws that prevent people from doing their own business startups.
Right, totally.
Like, that's one thing that you could do right off the bat.
Have more of a free market. How about that?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's easy to criticize capitalism these days, but what people are really criticizing isn't so much capitalism or free enterprise as maybe corporatism.
Right.
So you've got the highest, most consolidated corporations that, yes, they game the system. They control the politicians. Sure they do. All right? But that's not the same thing as having a truly free market.
Right.
I think it was John D. Rockefeller who said, free market, that's for losers. That's a paraphrase. But he really did say something like this. They don't want to rely on market fluctuations.
Totally.
Those people at
Too many
top.
variables.
No way.
Yeah.
So I think one thing we could do is, yes, allow people to literally just to create their own destiny. But I don't know if that's going to be enough to provide a life for everyone. I just don't know. We're in unknown territory here with the technology we're looking at, and I think like most people, I do believe in like enough of a social safety net. Excuse me. I mean, I don't want to see people starving in the street either. So we've got to figure out a system here. It's going to get harder and harder. I don't know if we're going to be able to stop this train. Like transhumanism, there may be no way to stop it. To be perfectly candid, I don't know. 20 plus years ago, there was a guy named Bill Joy who was a co-founder of Sun Microsystems. And he was talking in the 90s about the dangers of advanced runaway artificial intelligence and how we needed to stop it now.
Even Elon Musk is warning about it. And he's still investing in some of these things, but he's like, it's kind of crazy. You're going to replace humans.
It's like, it's an impossibility because you just can't do it. There's just too many people in this world. There's too many brilliant people. They're working on this. It's like this inexorable process. It's a train, and we're not getting off this train. So
basically, it's a future of robots and aliens. What do? We have to light the torch of freedom in people's minds. We have to tell them that you possess the infinite potential of the cosmos inside of you.
Yeah.
You have to connect to the stories of the heroes, and this is our challenge. This is the challenge of our time.
I agree. It's the answer to any time and any challenge, which is in philosophy.
Yeah.
In other words, having the proper philosophy of life and understanding our place and understanding the potential that we have within ourselves. I've often had an analogy of not an analogy. I've often had this idea that every society has its own iron law of finding a way to create the kinds of personalities necessary to fulfill all the functions in the society. So by that I mean, if this were some agricultural society of 1,000 years ago, we would have very likely different kinds of personalities.
Right.
Like one thing that would be different about us is that we would be willing and able every morning to get up at like 4:30 in the morning and milk the cows and do hard, like back-breaking labor.
Yeah, I'm not willing to do that.
And we would probably have a different idea of what humor is, and we would have a different idea of all kinds of things, because we would need to survive in this world.
Yes.
And so we would have to conform or die. But when societies evolve, they allow for the creation of different kinds of personalities, which was the great flowering, like in America and Canada too, during the 17th, 18th centuries, allowed for the creation of that sort of can-do philosophy, because there was a lot to get to do.
Yeah.
But now we're in a world where, in many ways, for many people, those possibilities are constricting.
Right.
And so the tendency is to create or to promote a personality that's much more docile, not the kind of personality that we might have grown up being taught was positive and healthy. This is my belief. And so it's each person's job to, we've got to learn to think for ourselves. And that means not think for what the social group may be pressuring you to conform to.
Right.
But really, truly to think for yourself. And that's hard, by the way.
It's easy to say, but it's hard to do.
It is hard. I'm 55 years old, and I've been in this game for a while, and I've spent my entire adult life, my entire life, trying to learn to think for myself. I've spent my entire life trying to pierce through the layers of illusion and deception. And I can tell you, it's still hard. There's never a day where I don't have to consciously work at piercing through those veils of illusion. And there's always a temptation to take it easy and just to go with the flow.
Yeah.
So,
but don't you feel the reward of stretching the muscles and realizing that there's so much more benefit? I mean, you must. I mean,
I love what I do.
This is what
I love what I do more than I can even.
Exactly.
I feel like the luckiest guy I know. I love what I do, and I love. I took a road years ago away from what was then my career path into all of this world of fringe, and that's been my great teacher.
Yeah.
So no, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And not too many, maybe 10 years ago, my daughter was a bit younger, and in a moment of exasperation, she was like 9 or 10 years old, she said, "Dad," because every note was with that gasping note that a little kid has, "Dad, why can't you be a normal dad like all the other dads that I know?" This is what my daughter, Elaine, said to me about a decade ago. And I just laughed. I laughed, and I wasn't laughing at her, which she at that time thought I was. I just laughed. I says, are you are you old enough to be taking drugs? Is that why you're saying this? Are you on drugs now? That you would think I am a normal dad. Like, that's never happening, my dude.
Right.
That's never happening. So I'm happy to say that my daughter really now gets me totally. We have great conversations, and she's a super cool gal, and I'm really proud of her. But, she went through this period where she just wanted a normal dad, and I just thought, that's not happening. So, no, I love what I do. And the rewards, look, not everyone's the same.
Yeah.
But if you're someone who really does question this reality and you want to know more, I can say it's a long road, but it's absolutely worthwhile. And sometimes it's lonely. It's often a lonely road, actually. Sometimes your friends will think you've gone off the reservation. When I left academia years ago, I wrote my UFO book in 2000, and I went back to my old university to visit one of my professors, who was like my mentor, and we were very close. And he was kind of shocked that I went off into this forbidden world of the fringe. And his first question was, Dolan, that's how we always talk, Dolan, why UFOs? And I said, why not? It's pretty damned interesting. And I've never regretted it.
Well, thank you, Richard Dolan, for not being normal, for refusing to be normal, and I recommend it. I'm also not normal.
No, you're not.
I am very abnormal.
Speaking from experience.
And I will continue to be so. And I hope that we can all find some answers to these questions, but you got to take enjoyment in asking the question. You don't always know the answer. Like you were saying, we don't always know how things are going to go, and it's okay.
It's a trap wanting to have every answer. You're not going to have them.
You're not.
One of my favorite books is by a Buddhist nun named Pema Chodron, Comfortable with Uncertainty.
I like that.
It's got a great cover, by the way, but the book is about, not having to know everything, and it's a blessing, not a curse.
You know the motto of my dojo?
No.
Calm, cool, and relentless.
I like that too.
Calm, cool, and relentless.
Very nice.
No desperation, no attachment to the outcome. Just be as you be and give your best.
Love it.
So, cheers to you, man. Thanks for the interview, and I love you, man. You're awesome.
Back at you, Whitehead.
RichardDolanPress.com. Hey, are you using WordPress for your membership site?
The membership site is RichardDolanMembers.com,
Members, right.
and I do use WordPress for that.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're putting some kick-ass membership stuff together, so if you ever need help, you let me know.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, guys. Peace out.
Peace.